there are some things that you say I find, and again, I'll give you a chance to explain them, that I think that are divisive and may sort of contradict what you're saying.
So your entire perspective has been pro-BLM, and your entire perspective on your network has been essentially that it was totally fine for the officers that were bludgeoned, the officers that were killed, the officers all throughout New York City in the BLM riots. You even had, Yale graduates.
Can we keep the focus?
Please let me finish. I just allowed you to finish. I just think it's nice to allow me to finish since I'm a guest on your show. Like I said, I'm just dizzy because I can't figure out whether or not you care about police officers.
Young people and old people who are trans, right? And they are not pretending. And it is not a mental disorder.
Well, it is pretending because you will literally never be able, if you are a little boy, to grow up and have a baby because you're not a little girl.
So what you're saying is, oh, you know what? The Holocaust was bad, but look over here. These people were worse than the Holocaust, so we shouldn't.
That's not that. First off,
that's what it sounds like. I'm telling you, that's what it sounds like.
You just said you didn't watch the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Don Lemon Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And you see that person there on your screen. Actually, a lot of people have been saying that, you know what, you should get Candace Owens on. You should get Candace Owens on. So Candace, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining us.
Anytime. Thanks for having me. I wish we had done it much sooner.
I do too, because quite frankly, listen, I know, this is going to be interesting for people. I'm not sure we're going to agree on much. Maybe we will, who knows? But I do have to say that I am happy that you are back in the game, because after you left your former platform, I said, you know what? I don't really agree with a lot from her. Sometimes I do, actually, but I think that you're deserving of a platform. And quite frankly, I think you're a bigger star than Ben Shapiro. And I've said that publicly before. Again, doesn't mean that we agree on everything. So I'm glad that you're here. I've interviewed a lot of people. Also, Candace, I don't want this, if I can say this, to be, a moment where, people, you or anyone, we're looking for, this fiery moment that's going to go viral because people are going to click on it. I really do want to learn about you. And I want you to be able to explain some of the things that you said and whether you believe them, whether they were taken out of context or whatever. But can we start? Is that okay?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really great. I just had a conversation with Russell Brand about the same thing. Like the left-right stuff is just getting really old and toxic. And I think we can all take each other out of context to make the other person look stupid. But I think people are more deserving of an actual conversation.
So I was going to start with the politics of the day, and we can always get to that because that can be kind of boring. But I mean, do you feel like after you left the other platform that you were on, do you feel different? Has your attitude or anything about life or your political beliefs, or has that changed at all?
It hasn't changed. I would probably say that I experienced more of an internal sea change at the beginning of last year, when I was still on my other platform. And I think people saw that toward the end of me being on the other platform. And there was just, and the show was performing really well and really strong. And I think it was because I had kind of broken with this idea that it's always like left versus right. And in a way that just welcomed more people into the show. So I personally changed probably starting at the beginning of last year, I would say.
There were people who were saying, because you went on to The Breakfast Club, right? Mm-hmm. And they were saying, oh my gosh, Candace Owens is Black again. She's going to come back to the Black community and she's going to be Black. And that's the way she's going to reemerge, much the same way that people said that I was going to be red-pilled when I came back to, whatever, the streaming and what have you. Is that, are you Black again? Do you feel that? What do you think about that?
People are going to be so shocked to learn this, and I guess I'll just announce it here, but I've always been Black. So it's like a thing. Every day I've just been Black my whole life. And it was interesting to see people take that narrative, because some people were like, she was doing this because, she decided to be Black because she knew she was going to get fired. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I went on the network because I got invited to go on for the first time ever. That was just my luck. And I think it was in response to me having done Joe Budden's podcast, and Joe Budden said something nice about me on his podcast, and I reached out on my podcast. So that was all very natural. And when I went on The Breakfast Club, I still said what I always think. I think people may have heard it different. And again, I think that is in large part due to the fact that Americans are growing tired of the hostility left versus right. and people are starting to listen to different ideas and seeing that we probably have more in common than the mainstream media would have allowed us to believe in the past.
Okay, you say that, but there are some things that you say I find, and again, I'll give you a chance to explain them, that I think that are divisive and may sort of contradict what you're saying. But before we get there, can we talk news of the day, politics of the day, and then we'll get into that? Is that cool?
Sure.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the breaking news. The first Democratic senator publicly questioning President Joe Biden, his election chances, after 7 House lawmakers broke party ranks and urged the 81-year-old to step aside. It's Colorado Senator Michael Bennet. He told my old network, and he said this on the record, Candace, that he expects the president to lose to Donald Trump by a landslide, and he heavily suggested that Joe Biden should end his candidacy. So then, Candace, this happened on MSNBC. Let's watch.
Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with.
Okay, so some people said, "Hey, wait a minute." She's not exactly saying Joe Biden, as many Democrats are saying now. Joe Biden is in that. He is the candidate. We stand by our candidate, and she's not exactly, emphatic about it. Do you disagree with that? What do you think?
No, she's not emphatic about that statement at all. But what I would say is that when I watch that, there's something about it that feels performative to me, and I think a lot of people feel that way. That suddenly everybody's pressed the button, and it's like throw Joe Biden under the bus and pretend that we just found out at the debate that he was mentally deteriorating. I actually was covering today on my show how George Clooney, I don't know if you saw this, but he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, essentially being very kind. I love Joe Biden, all this stuff. I saw him weeks ago at a fundraiser, and he just wasn't the same, and he can't go on, and he's calling for Joe Biden to step aside. And the question is, okay, you saw him at a fundraiser weeks ago. Why didn't you write this op-ed weeks ago? Why did you wait until the debate? So a lot of people are questioning whether or not there's already been a decision made and everyone already knows he's going to step aside, and they're just kind of prepping the public on that statement. And I know might seem cynical to you, but that's definitely what it looks like to me. I mean, we've been saying this about his mental health for years. Why are people just listening now?
There is a difference, though, Candace, between something, and that doesn't mean that someone can do the job, but hear me out here. There's a difference between something that happens to people naturally, right? We all get older. I have trouble sometimes recalling things that, like, I'm like, oh, what's that senator again? What's that name again? And that happens to the best of us. But there is a difference between that and someone who is, a perpetual liar, or doesn't believe in democracy, or is an election denier. Those two things are not equal. And I think that is the premise of what Democrats are operating on right now. Joe Biden may not be the man he was 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but he's still better than the alternative.
Yeah, obviously I fundamentally disagree with your assessment, and I think it's very strange coming from a party where Hillary Clinton denied the election results for years. I mean, and said that her election was stolen from her. It's very weird for people to suddenly just not remember that. Sometimes it feels like the press
there
just
was no
sort of
insurrection around that. I mean, she eventually accepted.
Well, now you're accusing him of the insurrection. He has nothing to do with.
No, I said, but there was no insurrection around that. I didn't mention.
You can say that or not, but you just said he's an election denier. Okay, well, that would put Hillary Clinton in the exact same camp. And so it's very weird when there seems to be this sort of like Men in Black memory wipe where people pretend that suddenly Trump was the first person who questioned election results, when that's been going on for a very long time in America and nobody cared about that.
Hear me out here. There's a difference between questioning an election, the results of an election, which happened with Al Gore and George Bush, than having almost every court in the land disagree with the assessment that the election was stolen. There's a difference between questioning an election than saying it was stolen. There's a difference between someone saying, I thought I should have won, and there were, I had all these wins that were, that were not at my back, than someone saying, you know what, the election was stolen, and that these people are heroes who actually desecrated the Capitol and beat up police officers, and a police officer ended up dying. That's a whole
Yeah.
different thing. Those two are not equal.
So your old network even debunks the points that you just made. Obviously, the person that died that day was Ashley Babbitt. The only person who died on that day
My own network does
was
not debunk that, Candace. That's
yeah,
not
they
right.
absolutely. I covered it on my show. Even
No, I work
CNN.
there.
No,
They do not.
okay.
They do not.
Well, I have
debunk
my
that.
computer. Do you want me to bring it up live? The CNN article where they debunked that Brian, who you're talking about, the police officer, died that day. He didn't
I didn't
die
say he
that
died
day.
that day. I said
Okay,
he
correct.
died.
Let me finish
The
this. You
police
said he
officer
died because you're trying to make people believe that it had something to do with what happened. He died of a stroke, a completely unrelated stroke days later. So that narrative that was quickly pushed out by CNN was then subsequently debunked. So the only person that died that day was Ashley Babbitt, and Ashley Babbitt was a Trump supporter. So only a Trump supporter died on that day. Regarding the insurrection narrative, there are questions that still have not been answered that seem implausible to me. I happened to be on that day in DC, 9 months pregnant, and it's just stunning to me that that whole summer DC burned and nobody cared, and then suddenly people are talking about an insurrection and nobody is asking the common sense question of why the FBI, while they can lock up grandmas for having walked into the Capitol, some of these charges are heinous, absolutely heinous. You see these people on camera just for simply walking in at the beckoning of security guards who allowed them in, were put into prison for a very long time. So I'll ask you the question: do you think it's a legitimate stance, or that it's legitimate that the FBI can't figure out who it was that dropped off pipe bombs the night before?
No, I don't think that any of what you said is very relevant, because the facts
Just not
speak
relevant.
for
Okay,
themselves.
the
No,
pipe
I
bombs are
don't
not
think that it's
relevant.
relevant. I think talking about the FBI is really deflecting the attention from what really happened. A friend of mine, Michael Fanone, was a police officer who fought that day, who had a heart attack, who had a head injury, who was beaten with flagpoles and beaten with sticks by people who were in that crowd. The officer who died of a stroke, shortly after. It's surprise. I think that it would be tough to say that the stress that he suffered from that did not have something to do with it. Ashley Babbitt broke into the Capitol. It's awful that anybody died. Police officers, you see the tape on camera, telling everyone to stand down as she tried to enter. She was not complying. As people say, when police officers or officials tell you to do something, one should comply. And when she tried to break into the Capitol and defy the officers' commands, they did what they had to do, and she ended up dying. It's awful that it happened, but to say that she died, and I assume insinuate that it was because of some nefarious actions by the officers, I just think that is beyond the pale and does not actually fit a solid narrative of what actually happened.
Well, it's very dizzying. I'm actually dizzy right now because your entire perspective has been pro BLM, and your entire perspective on your network has been essentially that it was totally fine for the officers that were bludgeoned, the officers that were killed, the officers all throughout New York City in the BLM riots. You even had Yale graduates.
Can we keep the focus?
Please let me finish.
Can we keep, Candace,
I just allowed you to finish. I just think it's nice to allow me to finish since I'm a guest on your show.
It is, but I want you to.
But you had them
before you
throwing
finish, I want you to
bombs,
keep the
literally
focus on the insurrection and not on
Molotov
BLM.
cocktails in the very same summer that you're talking about the insurrection. Molotov cocktails were thrown into police cruisers
Candace,
during
we
the
can talk
BLM
about the
George Floyd
insurrection,
riots.
but
You
we're
didn't
not
seem to
talking
have
about.
the same
We can talk about the
sensitivity toward
insurrection.
police officers.
We're not talking
So,
about BLM. Can we?
but it's relevant because it was happening in the exact same
not-
city.
Okay.
And so suddenly, like I said, I'm just dizzy because I can't figure out whether or not you care about police officers or you
Okay.
don't care about them, because now you're sharing emotional stories and now you're cutting me off when I want to share one about a Molotov cocktail that was thrown into a police cruiser in New York by some college graduates, and the media, the platform that you were on, cheered it on because this was about justice. But suddenly when it's patriots, You want to talk about the sad stories of the police officers. You're now saying that because you don't comply, you
Well,
can get
I
shot.
think
That's
that
fine if that's your
I
perspective.
think
And
that
Ashley
there are
Babbitt
more patriots in
wasn't
the
complying, but
country.
then we should probably
I
revisit
think
the
that
George Floyd
many
riots.
Americans can be deemed as patriots in this country, even if
Okay,
you
well,
belong
I
to
don't know why you're cutting me off. I
even if
haven't
you're
cut you off. I'm just
because
trying to get out my point.
I'm trying to tell you
So,
because we have very limited time. And the reason I'm cutting
okay,
you
well,
off
let's
is
move
because
on.
I want you to stick to the subject because you're deflecting and you're talking about
I'm not
BLM.
deflecting.
And
I'm
hang
not
on,
deflecting.
please. Let me make a point across. And BLM has nothing to do with the insurrection. We're talking about the events that happened in Washington. And
I just
so
want to know what the definition of an insurrection is, because when I was living in DC and the BLM was pulling down statues, they were marching on Washington, the media was fine with it. So it's confusing because the Brett Kavanaugh hearings and the women were storming into the Capitol, they were lining in the
I'm dizzy
hallways.
now because you're talking about
I'm really
something that has
confused about
nothing
when
to
it's an
do
insurrection
with the
and when it's not
insurrection.
an insurrection, because the Brett Kavanaugh hearings definitely looked like the definition of an insurrection when they were chasing down senators in hallways, trying to stop them from voting. But for some reason, the media supported that because, like, hashtag Me Too. But again, I'm just trying to get a consistent definition of when it's okay to storm the Capitol building and when it's not okay to storm the Capitol building because it's an
But
insurrection.
Candace, we're not talking about BLM. And we're
Yeah,
not,
that's the problem. We're
and
never
you're
talking
trying to,
about anything
I
Democrats
want to get
do.
back on the
It's
subject
just
because this
like
is not
Trump
helping anyone.
supporters.
This
Okay,
conversation is not helping anyone. So let's
so
get
let's
back on
move
the
on.
subject. BLM and what happened has nothing to do, and we can litigate that and we can talk about that. This is not a conversation about BLM. This is a conversation about what happened on
I was talking about the
January
Brett Kavanaugh
on
hearings
January
there.
26th, and this is
Yeah.
it's not about Brett Kavanaugh. Okay.
Okay, well, they stopped a vote, so I just think that
Okay.
might be relevant to your
Okay.
insurrection.
So do you believe the election was stolen? Because on July 21, you tweeted, this is July of 2021, you tweeted, quote, it has now been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cheated in the 2020 election. Do you still believe the election was stolen? Because even Trump's own Justice Department, the Supreme Court, courts all over the land said that there was actually no evidence to substantiate a stolen election in 2020. It was the
Yes, I
most
believe
secure
the
election
election was
in
stolen in
American history.
2020.
You do believe that?
Yes,
Okay. Why do you believe that?
because it's pretty obvious that COVID was used as a mechanism to fundamentally change the way that people vote. They were passing through absurd legislation, essentially saying that every single person would get a mail-in ballot, even if they hadn't requested one. And then there was actually footage of people dropping off multiple mail-in ballots when the counting stopped in the middle of the night. So yes, I believe that our election was stolen. We don't have to wax poetic about it. We're not going to agree on this issue. You're going to
I
give
agree.
the talking points that
No, I'm not going to give
stolen.
talking points. That's what I wanted to. I just want to get.
Yes, I still believe that.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. And that is where I want to keep this on the subject and not deflect to something else. And so, I don't work for CNN anymore. So, I don't associate me with that because I don't work for CNN anymore. One of the reasons that I brought up that tweet to discuss, 2020 election and beyond is because do you think it's fair to say, I think that you've had a political evolution over the last couple of years. Do you think it's fair to say, I think that you've become much more conservative in your thinking and in your stance and things that you say. Do you think it's fair to say that you've become more outspoken and more conservative on issues over the last couple of years?
I think I've thought more about what it actually means to be a conservative. And I would say that I've probably become infinitely more committed to my Christian faith. And so that might read as more conservative over the years. I think that's fair.
You've been more committed to your Christian faith. How does that play into your thoughts about politics?
When we think about conservatism, we think about tradition, it's traditionalism. And when I'm thinking about which traditions I want to uphold, it's the Catholic faith, it's Christianity. And I think I've now been in politics for 8-9 years. When I started, I was young, I was single, I, was running around wearing a MAGA hat. And now I'm a married mother of 3. And a lot of the conversations that we are having are heavier. We're talking about the future of this country that my children are going to have to live in. When we talk about any of these ideologies, we're talking about what they're learning in school today versus what you and I were learning when we were in school. And that has been a radical transformation. So it means more to me. And I think a lot of people, when I was pregnant with my first child, said, motherhood will change you, like it will soften you. And I actually found that politically, motherhood actually hardened me.
How so?
Because I realized that these conversations matter. These are not just talking points. This is not somebody talking in a news hit. This is going to have real world implications for my children.
Listen,
and giving you one example of that would be, the dawn of the trans indoctrination that you and I did not go through in school. That to me is a very severe thing. I think it's demonic, quite literally demonic, as in worshiping Baphomet. It goes back a long time, and I'm going to use my
You said
platform to speak
worshiping
about
what?
this.
I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Baphomet.
Okay, got it. Well, here's
Hmm.
the thing. I don't know about. I'm not sure I would call it an indoctrination. I do believe that it's legitimate to say that you have questions about it because it's a lot to take in. I wouldn't necessarily call it an indoctrination. And where I grew up, when I grew up, there were definitely trans people. And maybe there wasn't an awareness of it in the world or the country at large. But I remember trans people growing up. I remember people who were cross dressers growing up. My girlfriend's brother was a transvestite growing up. So there were definitely people who were out there who were part of the trans community. And I remember the threats that Chris got from my girlfriend's brother. I remember people on the street throwing things at him and threatening him. So I'm not sure it's an indoctrination. I think it's just maybe an awareness of things that happen in society. And that doesn't mean that the pendulum doesn't swing too far sometimes, but I'm not sure I would call it an indoctrination. That's all I have to say
Yes.
about that.
Well, when I was in school, I learned that it was a mental disorder. I know that's changed, but
That has
it
changed.
was in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder. And I accept that there are mental disorders, and people that are suffering from mental disorders should never be treated by people harassing them or people yelling at them or calling them names. So I'm sorry that someone that you knew went through that. But when people had mental disorders, it wasn't at least it wasn't commonplace to try to teach them about and normalize the mental disorders in classrooms, because children are experimenting with ideas and children always want to be different.
Yeah.
And if you say to kids, like, obviously propaganda works. If you tell kids smoke cigarettes, they all start smoking cigarettes. We've learned this. And then in my generation, we stomped out smoking cigarettes because of the reverse course on that and saying, like, no, actually cancer kills. And they
Well,
taught us in the classroom that cancer kills. And now the majority of people who were smoking like crazy in the 80s are not smoking anymore. So
yeah.
we know that psychological conditioning works, and that the majority of these 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds are not non-binary. They're just learning that as a way to be different, they can experiment with these things. And unfortunately, these have very evil results, because kids are being put on drugs that are quite literally used on pedophiles.
Well,
In prison.
that's not necessarily so. But listen, let me just say that
Lupron
about
is a
things.
drug,
I
is the
think that
drug
there are a
that is
lot of
used on
things.
pedophiles in
There's a
prison.
lot.
That's what's being given to children.
There's a lot to respond to that as far as the indoctrination. If it was an indoctrination, then I went to a Catholic school, so then I would be, a straight male married to a woman who attends church every single day. If there was any sort of indoctrination that was happening, so apparently the indoctrination at the Catholic school did not work on me, because I ended up being the exact opposite of what they wanted. The other thing is that the whole idea that they're giving young children drugs at an age, and the children are getting to decide at an age that they need these medical drugs for transitioning, that is absolutely not true.
What
And
do you mean that's not true?
it's
You
not
can
true.
get
And also,
you can get puberty blockers as a child. I had a whole person on my show
but
who I
that's
spoke
also
to
with
that
the consent of
transitioned.
the family. And the family, you can get puberty blockers as a child, but the
Yes.
parents have to decide that. That's not
Yes, so
some
they can get
child
puberty blockers.
who's decided. The parent and the child gets to decide that. So
Okay, but that they should puberty
that's a
blockers
whole nother thing. And then
fundamentally
you're
alter
saying it's
them
a
for
mental
life.
disorder. You understand that it has not been, it's been deemed not to be a mental disorder. And then you're saying that that you're, in your rhetoric, you're saying that it's a mental disorder.
It is a mental
It's not
disorder.
a
That's what I
mental
learned in
disorder.
school.
It's not
It
a
is a
mental
mental
disorder.
disorder.
Okay,
If you
so
think that you're a boy and you're actually a girl, you are suffering from a mental disorder, obviously, because you can't actually change your sex, obviously.
I
You
know
can
plenty
get
of
you can
children
get
now. I know
you
plenty
can
of
play
young
dress up, but you can't
I know
change your
plenty of
sex.
young people and old people who
Mhm.
are trans, right? And they are not pretending. And it is not a mental disorder.
Well, it is
They
pretending, because
know,
you will literally never be
and
able,
they
if you are a
know,
little boy, to grow up and have a
and
baby,
their
because
parents know.
you're
And
not a little
I would
girl.
hope that your child
So
would not grow up, or your children would not grow up and then thinking that they're trans and then their parents telling them the exact opposite.
I would
That would
tell
not be.
them that they have a mental disorder,
Yeah.
and we're going to get them help.
I
So
want to play
that's
this
really
because,
important.
to continue this conversation, when I say that, I think that your views have changed over time. This is a clip from one of your shows. It was just last week as we continue this conversation. It's about flat Earth and round Earth and conspiracies. Let's play this.
Sure.
If there's a bunch of people that believe something, I now want to know what it is that they believe. And of course, he pushed me on this, and he was talking about the Earth curvature and science. And I said to him, listen, I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. Actually, what I am is I am somebody who has left the cult of science. I have left the mega church of science, because what I have now realized is that science, what it is actually, if you think about it, is a pagan faith.
Okay. Candace,
Yeah.
do you actually believe this stuff, or are you saying it because you want to generate outrage and you want more attention and you want people to sort of click on your show? Do you actually believe that? I mean, science is science. What do you mean the cult of science? What do you believe? You're not a flat earther or a round earther?
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I think you're a very bright and very intelligent woman. And I said, is she just playing in our faces? Like, what's that all about?
First, let me ask you, did you watch the full episode, or did your producers pull a clip out of
No,
context?
I did not watch the full episode, but I'm
Okay,
asking
so let me
you
put it
to
into
put
context.
into
Yeah, no,
context.
sure. I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to put it
Thank
into
you. Thank
context,
you.
because that's the beauty of the media. It's just always a
Yeah.
clip, and then people go, oh, what's going on here? So that was an episode we were talking about birth control. I was sharing, I'm very passionately against the birth control because of all the women who in my life are suffering side effects, who can't get pregnant, and are realizing that inserting copper IUDs into your body over time can have an impact. And women were sharing their stories online about how the doctor told them it was safe and effective, and it obviously wasn't safe and effective long term, because people just simply accept what the experts tell them without thinking. We saw this during COVID, so I'm very comfortable saying this. But if I had been saying this years ago, people would have been like, she's crazy. But this is what we mean when we say science. And by the way, these ideas, if you want someone even more brilliant than me who wrote about this, C.S. Lewis would be a great starting place. He termed this scientism, where the people that are in control of science create a faith. They create a faith by saying, well, the experts say 6 feet social distancing works. And so everyone starts walking around with 6 feet social distance between them until Fauci comes around, like he did recently, and say, we kind of made that up. We were just guessing. The experts say the COVID vaccine, if you get it, you will not transmit or be able to get
Not
COVID.
exactly
And
what
then they
they
go,
said, but go on.
actually, that wasn't true. So people, and without knowing that, subjected their bodies and said, okay, I'm going to get this vaccine. Then they say the science has changed. Well, if the science changes and you've already impacted your body, as many women, I did not get the COVID vaccine, and I'm not meaning to judge people who did, but a lot of my female friends were having menstruation issues, as we talked about on the show. A lot of my female friends had miscarriages, as we talked about on the show, simply because they trusted the experts, not because they actually knew
You don't know
that
that
the
for sure that they
science
had
was
you don't know for
accurate.
sure that they had a miscarriage because of the vaccine. That's
They
not
had
what they're
first
assuming.
and foremost, they've already admitted that the vaccine, like we're now past COVID era scientism. So they've admitted that the 6 feet social distancing was fraudulent science. They admitted that the masking was
You realize you're
fraudulent
looking at
science.
something in hindsight. Hindsight is 2020 in your Monday morning.
Well, that's the point.
quarterbacking, right?
And until you
So
get hindsight, it's just a faith. And that is what I am talking about on my show. It is just a faith. People placed faith. It was not a science, it was a faith. Okay.
you said a
Real
phase or a
science.
faith?
So that's a faith. You just believe it. You can't see it. You
Okay.
trust the person. You trust this person who is a science, who's a doctor, who you've enacted as the Lord in your life, and you shouldn't do that. Common sense
Who
to
should
me
you
when I was a
trust?
kid. Common sense to me when I was a kid, like when people were pushing birth control pills on me when I turned like 15, every time I went to the doctor, women who are watching this will relate. They're suddenly like, birth control, you got a pimple, birth control. So I didn't need to trust the science or the experts I just said to myself, yeah, probably not a good idea to microdose yourself with hormones every single
What does
day.
that have to do with a worldwide pandemic and epidemic where people were
I'm answering the clip that you just showed. I'm
where a
putting this
lot
into
of people? I
context.
know, but you're going.
Yeah.
I want to get to it,
But because that's also what I talked about on my show. This is the beauty of actually watching a full episode and not using a clip. And so I said, now for me, it's going to require a little bit more than a faith, right? Because I'm realizing scientism just gets people to do things based on emotion without actually, and just going, trust the experts, trust the experts. I'm not trusting the experts on anything anymore, okay? I'm going to actually take a look at things and actually try to discern something by myself. Because the experts have
But
lies
isn't that
routinely,
based on
and people's
emotion
lives are
as
ruined.
well?
People got myocarditis. Kids died from heart attacks, and they admitted after the fact that they knew that could be a risk. And first, they gaslit
No,
the
I
moms
just
who were saying
researched
it
that,
happens.
and that is not true. But
That is, what do
go
you mean
on.
it's not true? There was a kid who won a lawsuit for myocarditis. He
Yeah.
quite literally, if you can look this up on Yahoo News, myocarditis, he actually won. The government had to pay him, I believe it was in the Philippines, who had to actually pay him. And after that point, after that lawsuit, they started putting the warning on the vaccines that it can cause myocarditis. So it doesn't help. It doesn't help if you're saying that you're no longer a part of the establishment. You're doing your podcast. At least acknowledge the things that even they have acknowledged now, that it causes
Well,
myocarditis, that it can impact menstruation. Anything that is impacting
I
your
never
menstruation
said I
is
wasn't part of
impacting
the
your reproductive
establishment, by the
health.
way. I said I did not work for CNN, but go on.
Okay, so okay. I'm glad you're admitting you're part of the establishment.
No, I mean, I don't believe that I'm part of an establishment, any sort of establishment. You would have to, you would have
That
to,
was
the premise is
wonderful.
that I belong to some part of an establishment. I do not. But I also say the things that you're saying are also, that's based on emotion. And you're
Okay.
comparing a woman who can volunteer to take a birth control pill, as opposed to a worldwide pandemic where people are dying. And science does evolve, just like the world evolves, and we
Mhm.
learn more about things. Just as the science around cancer and HIV, that's all evolving and it's improving. So over time, science evolves, it improves. So I don't understand the obsession with people who say, "Oh, I didn't do this," and they feel really good about possibly even harming their fellow man by not wanting to do things that's supposed to help the greater good. To me, that is the most un-American and most unpatriotic thing that a person can do.
Yeah, well, actually, the most un-American thing would be Marxism, and that's a Marxist philosophy that you do things for the greater good.
Yeah.
And it's fundamentally absurd. You should make sure that
You
what
should
you
be
are doing
selfish and
is
just do things for yourself.
it's not selfish. It's not selfish. It's actually the opposite to say that you should inject something into your body simply because this person says so. And by the way, the
No,
science is
you don't.
evolving and it
Here's the
may
thing.
change.
Here's the thing
It
that
is
you don't
selfish to
understand, that
ask
people don't
people to
understand.
offer
You
their
don't.
bodily autonomy in order to
Okay,
maintain their
but
jobs.
see,
It
I
is
think that's
selfish.
false, Candace, because
It is.
no, because no one, there was
Which
no
part is false?
mandate. You did not have to order people. If you did not want to take the vaccine, you did not have to take it. If you
If you did not take
if you
it, you
don't
would
want
lose
to
your
take a
jobs, and many
vaccine,
people lost their jobs. OSHA tried to mandate
okay,
it, and then they
but
had to
that's not a
fight that all
mandate.
the way up into,
You
well,
can
say,
voluntarily
oh,
not
okay,
do
so
it.
it's a threat. It's a yeah, we're not
Yeah,
mandating it, but just
yeah.
so you know, you're gonna lose your entire life and not be able to feed your
You don't have
family
to
if you
lose
don't
your
do what
entire
we
life.
say. I
But
mean, that's kind
if
of a
my
little,
parents, if I did not
it's a
take a
little
vaccine,
ridiculous.
I would not be allowed to go to school.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
because why? I was putting other people's lives in danger. So
this is gonna shock
you
you,
can
Don.
decide to
My kids are not
homeschool,
vaxxed.
you can
My
decide to
children are
do a
not
whole lot
vaxxed.
of things,
Yeah, and that's wrong,
but
by the
that's not a
way. That's
mandate.
wrong.
That's
That's why
wrong
I
for
moved to a
you.
state where there's medical freedom. And guess what? You can compare statistics in the states where they have the most unvaccinated children with states like California where they couldn't be more vaxxed. And so your entire philosophy that somehow the unvaxxed kids are harming the kids that are vaccinated is nonsensical, by the way.
Unvaxxed
How can you
people
say,
in
in order for
general
my vaccine to work,
died
you have to get a vaccine? What kind of science is that? If
places
your
where
vaccine is
people were
working, then you don't have to
unvaccinated.
worry about unvaxxed kids. You know, people are waking
Places
up to
where
this.
people were vaccinated had higher rates of death from COVID than other places.
That
That's
is
simply a fact.
simply
Go on.
untrue.
Okay.
That is simply made up
That
statistics
is
to
not made up.
justify the
It's
fact that they
absolutely
harmed a
true.
lot of people
Okay.
with not false science or evolving science, lies.
Yeah.
They straight up told people that
Okay.
if they got the vaccine, they were not going to get or transmit COVID. They lied, okay? They knew it was a lie because it required censorship to maintain the lie.
Candace,
They were
I
censoring
visited
independent voices who were
hospital
saying,
wards with people filled with people who did not take the vaccine and on their deathbeds. You know what they said to me? I wish that I had not listened to the people, to the QAnon and to the non-vaxxers and to those people. I wish I hadn't done it, because maybe I wouldn't be in this hospital dying.
oh, that's so shocking that you were able to talk to people on their deathbeds because people were not even able to see their loved ones. The hospitals were so locked down. So how were you able to speak to so many people on their deathbeds in hospitals in New York City?
But no, this was not in New York City, as a matter of fact, and it was
Where were you?
after the lockdown. It was at the hospital where I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And
Yeah,
if
it's quite
you can
shocking
go
because
back
they were
and look
not
at,
allowing in hospitals for people to even see
no,
their loved
they
ones,
were
and yet
allowing
you were
people.
able to talk to
You
people on their
forget,
dying bed.
that there were
That was their death
phases.
wish, to talk to Don Lemon about the vaccine. It seems like one of those
Candace,
stories when they
you're trying to
say, like,
explain to me where I
it
was
just
and
seems
what
like one of those
happened, and
fairy
you're
tale
not.
stories where they say,
Don't try
like,
to
on their
explain to me, Candace.
deathbed, she
This
said,
was
you know, I just don't
after.
really buy
This
that.
was
I don't really buy this,
after.
that you spoke to tons of people on their deathbeds.
Okay,
I just,
this was
I'm
after.
going to rate that false.
Okay, no, you're not going to rate it false, because all you have to do is go back
Was it
and
their
look.
last words
Go back
too?
and look. No,
Okay.
their last words were not to me, but some of their last words were to me because some of them died after I left the hospital. It was not when we had the lockdown. This was shortly after things started to open back up. We could actually travel on planes, when we could leave our houses, and there were still people in COVID wards. And I interviewed them when I worked for CNN, and they said, I wish that I had taken the vaccine because maybe I would not be dying. And their loved ones afterwards
They
said
allowed
they said
journalists
that on their
into the hospital
deathbed. So
wards.
what you're saying, I think, is
Fascinating.
completely
Well, I just want
not
to share a
true.
story too. I too was allowed as a journalist into hospital wards, and people said to me on their deathbeds, I wish that I hadn't taken the vaccine
Mm,
because it didn't work and I'm still dying
yeah.
on this deathbed. So I had the
Well,
same thing happen to me.
if it didn't
Same
work
story.
and they're still
Yeah.
dying, then
Yeah,
how could
I got the
something happen?
vaccine and yet somehow I'm still on my deathbed. So clearly it didn't work. So that was that. I don't know. That's what they shared with me on their deathbed.
Okay, so if they wouldn't
I was
have
allowed
gotten,
into a
well, that
hospital
doesn't
ward
make
here in
sense though,
Tennessee.
because how do they know if they didn't, if they didn't get the vaccine, what difference?
They did get it and they were still put on ventilators. So the vaccine didn't work. And so I'm a journalist. They allowed me into the hospital wards and that's what they told me. And I was working
How
in
were you
media.
able to go in the hospital wards and we were on lockdown and they got to talk? I'm just being facetious here.
I know.
It goes both ways. Okay, so this is a quote from you, right? After you said that you were leaving the cult of science, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to play clips. I know that you want people to watch the full
No,
episode.
I'm
but I'm
fine.
going to
I'm
play
happy to put them in context.
clips. And you said, quote, no matter what, if there is a bunch of people who believe something, I now want to know what it is. So in the spirit of all of that, and if we can do it quickly here, right? Because I know that you're very busy and you have things to do. So I want to know, and you can tell me yes or no if you agree or disagree, because some of these things are deemed as conspiracy theories, like flat Earth or round Earth. I know that you said maybe that was taken out of context. So I'm going to say if you agree or disagree. These are not clips. These are just quotes. The 1969 moon landing was staged in Arizona.
I 100%, after reading this book, Chaos, believe that the moon landing was a complete and utter ridiculous hoax on the American people. I used to not believe. I actually always had an instinct about that one, and then I read a lot into it, and I was just like, okay, this is actually kind of ridiculous. It's like the Easter Bunny for adults,
Okay.
Yep.
All right. The U.S. government was behind 9/11.
No, I don't believe the U.S. government was behind 9/11.
You don't. You think it was just as reported?
Not as reported. Obviously, not as reported. I did a whole episode on that. People should watch it.
Okay.
With tons of things that we weren't told about it.
It's still up online. I would. Okay, go ahead. People can watch
Yeah.
it. All right. The mass shootings that have been faked to promote gun control laws.
No, I don't believe that.
You don't believe that. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Barack Obama was not born in America.
I don't even know where that one comes from. I don't know anything about that conspiracy theory.
No, I'm just asking you. Well,
Yeah.
you don't know where it comes from. I mean, Donald
I
Trump.
literally don't know where it comes from. I mean, I was quite young, I was in 2008. I hadn't even voted at that time, so I didn't follow. I guess the best way to say is I was in college. I didn't follow the Barack Obama Kenya thing
You
that went
didn't
on. I just
follow
wasn't.
that. I mean, that was beyond 2008. The birtherism thing with Donald
I
Trump.
didn't. I
He's
was
saying that
not at
Donald
all
Trump
engaged in
was-
politics. I was in
Okay.
college when he won, and
Okay.
do I
Fair
seem
enough.
like a dishonest person? Would I not tell you
No,
if
no, I
I
think
followed
that's
it and
fair
believed
enough.
it?
If you didn't follow it and you don't know, but I'm surprised that you
Yeah.
as a journalist and someone who is so opinionated that you haven't done research on that. But if you haven't,
Well,
you
you're
have.
inspiring me to. I will.
Okay. The CIA killed JFK.
Yes, I believe that.
You do. Why is that?
Yes. Because there would be no other reason for them to lock down the files for as long as they did and then come up with a stupid Russia did it thing that long. The only time you would lock down files like that regarding a sitting president being shot. And by the way, if they knew Russia had done it, we would have gone to full-blown war because they would have killed the sitting president. And also because, and this is a very interesting fact that I learned in this book, Chaos, that people should read and actually become very informed about this. The individual that shot the individual who shot JFK, his name was Jacob Rubenstein, was subsequently MK Ultra'd. That was a government program in which they had realized that if you give people a cocktail of drugs, you could essentially not brainwash them, but you could make them crazy instantly. They could give you schizophrenia instantly. So the doctor that was behind that, Dr. Leslie, this is all a fact, by the way. This is not like these are declassified. The reporter who worked on this for 22 years of his life working on this was Tom O'Neill. So I know you're laughing, but I'm encouraging you to actually read it. It could just be something you didn't know. The book is called Chaos, the CIA, the 1960s, and MK Ultra. And they MK Ultra'd, admittedly, in the documents, they MK Ultra'd Jacob Rubenstein, which is why the judge, on the day that he appeared, the second day that he appeared, said, what happened to him? I was speaking to him totally fine yesterday, and now you're telling me that he's legally insane.
But what I want you to know is, and I think people, the book is called Chaos, as you said, people read it. Some of the things that you're mentioning and the names that you're mentioning have been written about before. And just as maybe you weren't aware of the birth certificate, the other things, perhaps you weren't aware of the investigations that have taken place before that.
You just can't shoot a president in broad daylight, and then we pretend we don't know who did it. That's just that. You have to be a conspiracy theorist to believe our government had nothing to do with the shooting of JFK. That's my viewpoint. It's too ridiculous.
Okay, I'll disagree with that because I just don't. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Do you take offense when people call you a conspiracy theorist?
Do you think what?
Do you take offense when people call you a conspiracy?
No, because I've studied the history of psychology in this country, and I know that term was actually entered into the American mindset after the shooting of JFK. They started using the term conspiracy theory to make people get off of their tail or not ask questions by making it seem like it's crazy to want to know who shot a sitting president in broad daylight. So on my show, I cover a lot about the history of psychology and propaganda. Edward Bernays, who's considered the father of propaganda in the United States. And you will learn that terms like that are meant to make you think that there's nothing here. You're a conspiracy theorist. No, it's common sense that the government would not hide who shot a sitting president unless it was done by the government. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and quite often the answer is the most obvious. Sometimes things are just conspiracy theories. Okay, so listen, there was, to be honest with you, we had this debate and discussion about whether or not to do this interview today because of something that you said on your show. And members of my staff took offense to it. I actually took offense to it. And I did not watch the whole show. I saw the clip. But on your show, and I'm going to play the soundbite, and I want you to explain it, because you said specifically you were commenting on Dr. Joseph Mengele, right, and the experience, his experiments on prisoners in Auschwitz. And you said this, and I want to get you to explain to the audience of what you meant. Here it is.
On innocent people. Candace, come on, that's the difference. They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. I mean, like the idea that they just cut a human up and then sewed them back together. Why would you do that? Literally, even if you're the most evil person in the world, that's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. Just slice a person in half and sew them together. That just sounds like bizarre propaganda.
Okay, so, but what you're saying is based on what you feel, again, as you say, based on feelings rather than fact. There are so many facts to support what happened with Dr. Mengele. I wonder if you understand just how harmful it is for you to say things like that when there is documented evidence of Mengele's experiments. It is documented. It is not propaganda.
So would you like me to put that clip in context? Because
Sure,
I think
yes.
it's really relevant. Sure. So first and foremost, I said they, which would probably indicate to most people that I was speaking about more than one person. And the show was about the things that we learn in school, the most horrific things that we learn in school, and how I will show you that what we did in America is actually worse. So the truth is that they, the Nazi scientists, were brought over to the United States after the war, an operation known as Operation Paperclip. And the experiments that took place thereafter, the United States government, conducted way worse experiments, so chief among them being Sidney Gottlieb, who I spoke about on the show extensively in terms of the experiments that were enacted on our troops. Again, that terrifying book will really wake you up to what these Nazi scientists who were told are so horrific that we brought them over. The big piece, by the way, the reason why they cut out those 4 seconds and didn't talk about the entire monologue was because most Americans don't know about the other Holocaust that took place in the world, right? Where we can only talk about the feelings. You're talking about how people felt in your staff about a 4-second clip. Well, why don't you go talk to some of the Christians and maybe ask them how they feel about how it feels that when we talk about the Christian Holocaust, which is what this episode was about, the 12 million Germans that were ethnically cleansed, the Bolsheviks who mass murdered Christians, Henry Kagoda, who was the greatest mass murderer of the 20th century, who put us into concentration camps. Suddenly the media gets mad and they take out 4 seconds and they, again, somehow make it about Jewish people in the Holocaust. That's not the only Holocaust that happened. And I will use my platform to speak about the atrocities that Christians face, and I will do so unapologetically. So if you're looking for an apology for me saying that the idea that the Nazi scientists did this and it was so horrific that we then decided to bring them over to the United States, you're not going to get one. You know, I'm at a place where I'm really
I'm not looking
tired
for you.
of like
I didn't ask for
everybody's
you
feelings
to
mattering
apologize,
more than the
Candace.
history of what was done to Christians.
Okay.
I think it's time. I think it's okay for us to talk about the Christian Holocaust. It's 2024. Let's talk about the Bolshevik Revolution and what they did to Christians.
Okay, a couple different things there. I'm not asking you to apologize. I just wanted to know what you meant by that, and what I heard in that clip had nothing to do with what you said, because you said you thought it was ridiculous, the method by which Dr. Mengele was doing his work.
I didn't say Dr. Mengele. I said they. So
Okay.
right there,
You said-
you're
okay, so
live
you said
editing
they.
according to what Zionist media, who were upset that I talked about how Israel protected the mass
You
murderers.
think let's just specifically, you think what happened with Dr. Mengele is true? You believe that? Is that
There
what
were
you believe?
definitively experiments on twins. I specifically said we were told, and I don't even think they still say this, by the way,
Okay.
and you can fact check this, that they cut, and I didn't even say a twin. I said they cut a human being, right, and then they sewed them back together. I don't know how this became about Dr. Mengele's twins, as the media just goes off and says whatever they want. I don't think they still say that. There were a lot of things that we learned, and I would talk about in this episode, that have since been updated, and have people will say that, okay, it wasn't that part that was true. The correct thing is this is what's happened. I'm not sure. I mean, you can definitely fact check that, and you should. I don't think anymore they teach that somebody was cut in half and then sewn back up like an individual. I don't think so.
I think that they still do teach the truth
Okay.
about what happened. With
No,
Dr. Mengele.
and it's
Here's
not-
the
I'm
thing,
not-
though. Let me
okay.
ask you this: why do you feel the need then to defend Nazis or
Okay. Nazis aren't alive anymore, so we got to stop you
Why-
calling
but why
everybody
do
a
you,
Nazi.
why do you feel the need then to sort of go down this rabbit hole and to defend something that was horrific, and to say that, we had other, why are you comparing what happened in the Holocaust to other atrocities? Because it's awful. Why can't you just stick with the Holocaust? And
Why
are you
can't I
why are you-
cover Christian
can't talk
history?
about
What
it,
is
but why
this?
are
What do you mean stick
defending-
with the
Why are you
Holocaust? What do you
defending
mean by
those
that?
people's actions? I don't understand that. There's
What,
no
nobody
way.
defended any actions. That episode was about the fact that after the war, and this was a BBC documentary, not a Candace Owens documentary. It's a BBC documentary and I played parts of the documentary. It talked about how the Allies committed atrocities against the German-speaking civilians. They were not people who voted for Hitler. They were not Nazis. They were children who were lined up and shot.
Mhm.
Their bodies were thrown on the ground while they were alive, and they were rolled over on cars. The footage is in the BBC documentary. It's called The Savage Peace. When people watch this documentary, they are so astonished and shocked that we didn't learn about it in school that they begin asking real serious questions. And one of those questions that you ask is, why are we not told about the mass killing of Christians all around the world? What you just said, like, why can't we just let it be about the Holocaust? What is that?
well-
That's like the most selfish thing in the entire world. Let me finish. The most selfish thing in the entire world is for me to spend an hour talking about the atrocities that innocent Christians who had nothing to do with Adolf Hitler faced, and then to have Zionist media talking heads somehow make it about the Holocaust. It's not about the Holocaust, okay? Christians suffered too. In fact, we are the most persecuted religion in the world. And I am so sick of it. I am so sick of there can only be one victim
Candace,
narrative.
Come
And if
on.
you start
I am
talking
a
about
Christian, and we are not the most
Christians are not-
persecuted in the world. Come on.
that is a
But
fact. What are you
just say,
saying?
what
That
it
we're not the
sounds
most
like?
persecuted
It
religion in the
sounds
world. Do you
like
know
to
what's
you-
happening in Armenia? Do you know what's happening in Nigeria? Do you
tell
know what just
you-
happened in Canada?
let
The
me
fake
tell you
story
what
that
this-
was propagated by all of the mainstream
right.
networks about the nuns, and they found the mass burial, which allowed 85 Catholic churches to be burned to the ground in the last 3 years in Canada. We are still being persecuted right now.
Okay.
So I take great offense to you coming in here about the sensitivities of the people that are working on your show when I'm sitting here telling you that I'm a Christian and
Well, I
I'm
think the
offended
sensitivities
by
of
what you're
people who are-
saying,
who are
and you
working on my
laugh,
show, I
you
think
mock
that's
Christian
very,
persecution.
very important.
Do you think
because
people to laugh when someone tells you about Christian persecution? Because let me tell you something. If I
I'm
had
not
done
laughing.
that,
I
I
think
had
it's
laughed
laughable.
about the
I don't think it's
Holocaust,
funny.
I would be
think it's
chased out of
laughable.
polite society. Then don't laugh. Don't laugh at Christian
Well,
persecution.
being
Don't do it.
laughable is mean that the name is in the term. It's laughable.
Do not
But let me just say
laugh.
that
You
it
literally
sounds
just
like,
laughed
Candace,
when I
what you're
talked about
saying
Christian
is-
persecution.
what you're
Don't do that
saying
ever again. Not in my presence.
what you're saying is, okay, Candace, thank you. So what you're saying is, oh, you know what? The Holocaust was bad, but look over here. These people were worse than the Holocaust, so we shouldn't.
That's not that. First off,
That's
first
what it
and
sounds
foremost,
like. I'm telling you, that's what it sounds like.
you just said you didn't watch the episode.
No, but I'm saying that's what it sounds like. That's what you're saying. I don't have to watch the episode. I was listening to the words that you just said. You just
And-
spent 3 or 4 minutes talking about the other atrocities and how bad they were.
Yes,
You're not
the
talking
other
about how bad
atrocities
the
that have happened in
Holocaust
human history outside of the Holocaust are things that we are relevant and allowed to talk about, especially when the numbers of Christians that were persecuted following the Russian Revolution and the manner in which they were killed, people that were beheaded, priests that were shot. Yes, it is. I can talk about Christian history, and I don't need to feel guilty about that, and I
Okay,
won't.
that's
Okay.
fine. All right, good. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to
And
be
please,
anything.
genuinely,
Yeah.
please
Okay, so
never,
listen.
please, when I come on your show, have enough respect not to laugh when I talk about Christian persecution, because you would never do that if I was
Well,
Jewish and I was talking about the
listen,
Holocaust.
you can't tell
You
me
would never do that.
you should have enough respect to know not to tell people how to react. You can't tell someone not to laugh.
Okay. Well, then I
come on.
double dare you
Okay.
when a Jewish person is talking about persecution of Jews to laugh. You won't do it.
I won't do it because I actually believe that there were persecution of Jews, and I
And you
believe
don't
that there are
believe that
no.
Christians were
Let me finish my
persecuted.
thought. I believe that there is persecution of Christians. I don't think it's the most persecuted religion in the world. Okay, so listen.
Laughable.
So listen. Consider. Okay, laughable. Good. You agree with me. Thank you. So listen. When you know what happened with you was a Daily Wire, right? Is that the network you were on? What happened with you at the Daily Wire because of your stance on what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and what you just explained. My question to you is, because people think that you are you anti-Semitic?
No, I'm not anti-Semitic.
Go on.
Go on with what? You asked me a question. I answered it.
You said
I don't
you're
need to
not
launch into defense
anti-Semitic.
of myself because I'm just not anti-Semitic. There's nothing that I hear that I need to add. I guess today anti-Semitism, the definition keeps expanding, and now I guess it means if you don't fall over yourself every time Bibi Netanyahu speaks, they're just going to call you an anti-Semite. Nope, I'm a Christian. Kids being bombed is upsetting to me, and I have a right to say that without being called an anti-Semite. And if you want to call me an anti-Semite for it, I simply don't care.
I'm not calling you an anti-Semite. I'm at because people call you that, and I think, look, if you there's the whole talk about Zionism and anti-Semitism and whatever. I think it's a conversation that you just can't win. But I would like for you to be able to explain yourself, because
Judaism is not Zionism, and it doesn't matter how many people insist that it is. It's just not. It's a political party, and it puts the interests of Israel above everything else. I grew up with Jewish people. Jewish people are my best friends. The nation of Israel is not Judaism. It's a nonsense to suggest that we can critique, as we did earlier, talking about Joe Biden, that we can critique our own president, and nobody cares, because we should. You should be able to hold leaders and their decisions and their feet to the fire. And then to say that if you do the exact same thing over what Bibi Netanyahu's actions are, then you're somehow anti-Semitic.
Okay, I understand that, and I don't disagree. I think you can criticize and analyze the actions of the Israeli government, the IDF, and also Bibi Netanyahu. But to say that, listen, I'm not anti-Semitic because I have Jewish friends, it's kind of like saying I have black friends. I don't think that actually helps your argument, Candy.
No, I didn't say that. What I was saying is that I have Jewish friends. Judaism is not Zionism, as in I have friends who are Jewish who don't support what's happening overseas.
Okay.
Judaism is not Zionism. They don't stop being Jewish because they disagree with what Bibi Netanyahu is doing.
Okay, you say that you're not anti-Semitic, but I can't tell you what's in your heart. I believe you. You said that you're not anti-Semitic. You don't believe that you're anti-Semitic. But there are anti-Semites and neo-Nazis. They do love you. And I want to play this clip. This is from Nick Fuentes, his show just this week. Watch this.
One other big development, Candace Owens did a show today. She did her show, and she talked about my beef with Jordan Peterson. And so I really appreciate her covering it. We love Candace Owens. She's beautiful, she's very intelligent, and she is really hardcore. She's been going off.
Does that bother you that, and that's the whole reason I said, it looks this way, and maybe that's not your intention, as you said, but it looks this way, like you're saying, hey, don't look at what happened with the Holocaust, look over here. But if you have people like Nick Fuentes who said, hey, we love you, whatever, maybe your message isn't hitting correctly. What do you think of Fuentes saying
well,
that
now you're just conflating.
This neo-Nazi audience love you?
Sure. So now you're just conflating things because you're still kind of trying to sell this narrative that this somehow is about Jewish people. What Nick Fuentes is talking about, which is the first time I'm seeing it because I don't watch Nick Fuentes nearly as much as apparently everybody in the mainstream media does. What he's talking about is what I covered on my show as a news item, which was Jordan Peterson and him having a back and forth, where Michaela, Dr. Jordan Peterson is, by the way, very lovely, a very kind person, but it was a very newsworthy item when Michaela and Peterson, being his daughter, called for censorship. Called for straight up censorship. She's like, we need to have censorship, anybody that uses the term filth. And it was a back forth between her and Nick Fuentes because he responded And he said, your father literally called me a rat last week. This was a trending item on Twitter. I covered it on my show. To the extent that Nick Fuentes enjoyed the fact that I covered it in a meaningful capacity, because it is problematic when anybody calls for censorship. I don't care if the person's on the left or the person's on the right. You will make an enemy of me because I support the First Amendment and I believe that we have to have free speech. What can I say about that? You know, it's an absurd thing for people to keep pretending. I'm a person that has, across social media, 10 million followers. And when you start getting desperate because you can't actually pull something that I've said, you start going, well, what do you think about this account? And this person has also said this, and this person likes you. If you did that, and I was then accountable for the words that every single person that followed me said, there's no way you can survive that. I could do that right now to you. I could have had my producers look at this person who follows
100%.
Don Lemon. They've said something against Black people. So Don Lemon, it's like, that's a ridiculous thing to say.
But
To the extent that you ask me, and this has happened before, as Piers Morgan did, he said, and he said, you know, this is some things that Nick Fuentes have said. Do you agree with it? And I said, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Hold me accountable for what I actually
Well,
said.
that was the
Simply
reason I
because-
asked you about it. Because
Yeah, but I
So
don't
I'm
agree.
not,
That
don't
you
take
showed
offense.
me.
I'm not, it's not, this is not a gotcha. I'm asking you.
But that is such a gotcha. That is such a gotcha to say it's nothing that you said, but let me show you this person who likes you. Because what you're trying to do is play this strategy with the public so they watch it and they go, well, she must be saying all sorts of things if this person likes her. Most people do like, if you're going to say something on their show and you're showing the back forth, that, you know, he's obviously going to say, look, Candace covered this issue in a way that's consistent with the beliefs of the First Amendment. So he may say something that I fundamentally disagree with. But if Nick Fuentes says 1 + 1 = 2, and I agree with that, that doesn't mean that I subscribe to everything Nick Fuentes says. If Nick Fuentes says only women can give birth, and I agree with that, you then go, oh, look, Nick Fuentes is celebrating you because you said only women can give birth. I mean, this is then you're smarter than this, Don. You're in the public sphere. You know we cannot be beholden or responsible for every comment that is made by people who support us and follow us.
Well, that's why I put it up there, because if someone like Nick Fuentes was saying good things about some of the things that I believed or what I said, that would actually be problematic for me. And I would want to respond to that. I would welcome the opportunity for Candace Owens to play that clip on her show so that I could knock it down and say, I don't believe in anything Nick Fuentes or any of his followers or viewers or whatever. I don't understand why they are happy with what I said, but this is what I believe, and this is the context.
I do believe that it is problematic that Michaela Peterson called for censorship. So I can't knock that down. I can't say, like, what do you want me to say on the show? Well, because Nick Fuentes agrees with that perspective, I'm now anti-speech. I believe in free speech. I believe that what Michaela Peterson said was wrong. I genuinely believe that.
Okay.
Like you can't just call for censorship.
I've got to ask you about this because this is from your old show. And as I said, there are some things, I mean, you've actually defended me before. And I was like, wow, Candace Owens, whatever. And there are things that I do where I say, you know what, Candace got it right. I like it. And there are other things where I'm like, oh my gosh, why the fuck is she saying that? Right. And this is one thing that I've been wanting to ask you about, Candace, because it really bothered me. But I want the explanation in the context, as you say.
Do you have any clips of anything that like you agreed with, or we're just gonna like pretend this is a friendly interview as you can okay. Just wondering, is there even one clip of something that you agree with?
I don't know. Maybe I agree with the next clip. But anyway, roll the next clip, please.
Bring shame back. Bring back saying you are disgusting, you are wrong, you are a hoe, you are a pervert. Call things for what they are. And that is another way that they've psychologically tried to transform speech in America by saying like, oh, okay, you have free speech, but if you say that word, like if you say like, oh, that's whack or that's gay, then that would make you a homophobe. You don't want to be a homophobe, do you? It's no, we shouldn't do that. And it's even been the disappearance of words that actually had real meanings, like growing up, majoring in English, reading old English novels and understanding that a word like is a real word. It means a bundle of sticks.
Okay, so listen, I believe in free speech, right? But I also believe that free speech comes with consequences. So the word you said was right? Is that exactly the word? So what did you mean by that? You think it's okay to say the word, to call people to their face?
No, actually, I said words have meaning. And so when you start allowing the perverts to dictate speech, then words just have to go away. And as I said in that clip, when I was growing up and I was reading English novels, when people say you're walking through the woods to get it meant a bundle of sticks. And then they said you can no longer say this word that has a real meaning, right? a bundle of sticks because some pervert took that and threw it as an epithet towards gay people. I think that's actually that's a wrong way of thinking, because then what you're doing is you're allowing perverts to dictate society. So I don't like the death of the English language because people are getting offended. So that's like, I could pick any word. I could say, plant. And from now on, every time I see a gay guy, I'm going to be like, he's a total plant. And then eventually they say you can't say plant anymore. It's like, no. This is a real word that has meaning. Attack the person who's perverting the word, but you don't suddenly disappear a word and you say you can no longer say it, or you can no longer read these Virginia Woolf novels because the word has been perverted. I think that's a backwards way of thinking.
Read Virginia Woolf novels, and the only people I know who are trying to ban books, Virginia Woolf. And other books that even say the N-word. I mean, it's conservatives. That's who's trying to do it. I don't think that you should be banning books. But I do know, Candace, that language evolves over time. And when people say that word to me, they're not calling me a cigarette. They're not calling me
obviously, that's the point. It has a context. So if you want to punish that person because they're saying that offensively, that, if you feel that this person, but it's not fair to then say to everybody else who's not using that word that this word has now been banned. I just think that's ridiculous. That's my point.
You think people should
I don't think you can suddenly say go backwards and delete words that had real meaning because someone has perverted it, because then it never stops. It just becomes constantly having to update the language for people's feelings. And I don't think that we should be doing that.
So you would never call me a in my face, right?
Well, why would I just randomly call you a
I'm just meaning.
Have you ever seen the Louis C.K.
skit
on? Have you ever seen the Louis C.K. skit on?
No, I like Louis C.K., but I don't think I've ever seen a skit on.
You should watch it.
Yeah. No, but you would never call like a gay person that to their face.
That seems like an absurd. Like, why? No, of course, I'm not just going around. I'm a 35-year-old mother. I don't go around being like, "Hey, you're." It's just like, I'm not 18 years old. Like, I'm not going around calling people names, period. I wouldn't go up to a fat person and call them names. I wouldn't call it's just like it's an absurd thing to be going around pointing and calling people names because I don't like them. I would no. So the answer is no. I would not.
Do you use the N-word?
No, I don't.
No. Okay. Mm-hmm. Here's something interesting that we may have some common ground on. Okay. But what do you think about same-sex marriage?
It's a sin.
You think it's a sin? So you think I'm sinful?
What's that?
You think I'm sinful because I'm married to a man?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes, okay. You're sinning. You are in a sinful relationship. I actually don't believe marriage can be between two men. So I don't.
But you understand, though, Candace, and maybe we're not going to agree on this now. I thought we would. Do you understand, though, that the same Bible verses and the same scriptures that are used to call same-sex marriage sinful are used to call interracial marriage sinful as well. And so there are people who would say that you are in a sinful marriage.
Can you tell me which verse it is that would make people say?
The thing is that it's actually not there, and that people twist the Bible verses. That's my whole point. Thank you for proving that, because it doesn't say that. And it's actually, you're going to say Leviticus or whatever. It's not actually what Leviticus says, but go on. I don't want to get into specifics about the Bible, but that's not what the Bible says. It's just people using and interpreting scripture in a way that they want to interpret it. So look, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I don't believe that I'm in a sinful marriage, but there are people who believe, Candace Owens, that you are in a sinful marriage because you are in an interracial marriage. And I say that as someone who is in an interracial marriage, so I am doubly sinful.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody make a biblical argument against people being married that are black and white. So that's why I said, can you just tell me what verse that was? Sodomy is obviously a sin, but I've never heard a biblical argument. I'm happy to learn. I honestly, I'm happy to learn.
Sodomy is not just for gay sex, right? You know that, right? Sodomy is.
Yeah, it's a sin always, by the way.
Yeah, it's a sin between, it can be a sin between heterosexuals as well.
Yes, that's correct.
So, okay, but you've never heard that interracial marriage was sinful?
I've never heard somebody make a biblical argument for interracial. I've never, and that's why I'm saying if you could present that to me, and if maybe you're familiar with what verse that was.
Yeah, but actually it's not a biblical argument. It's also a religious argument as well, more so than anything, that you're in a sinful marriage and that black and white people should not be married.
I mean, I'm obviously very aware that people could think that ideologically, but I've never heard that biblical argument made ever in my life. And I'm happy to be proven wrong here, but I think you made that up on the spot there.
So by saying that, no, I didn't actually, but by saying that you believe that I'm in a sinful marriage, Does that mean, though, that I should be discriminated against?
No, I've never called for
So you
discrimination.
believe in the
People sin.
separation of church and state then?
Heterosexual couples can sin as well. I mean, but I, I hope that you deal with that. I want you to be Christian and to understand why it is that sodomy is a sin and what else it yields in society. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
That's
But
those are
that
my
doesn't
beliefs.
mean that you believe that I should be discriminated against.
I don't believe
I should be
any
able to have,
person.
under the Constitution, you believe that I have the same rights as you and other heterosexuals, and that my marriage is just as valid under the Constitution as anybody else's, including.
Well, I believe that the problem became that gets into a deeper theological discussion, but like the government should have never taken marriage away from the church. It should have been something that was maintained as a church practice. And so a lot of things happened there when the government took over and began marrying people, because then the arguments became, well, you get a tax break if you're married. And that is a way longer discussion that we can have on a different day. But to answer your question, I would never want any person based on their sins to ever be discriminated against, ever. I mean, I don't believe in discrimination. I don't believe that people should be treated differently. I think people should get help, and like we were just talking about with trans indoctrination, I believe that's a mental illness and people should seek help. But I don't believe that they should be discriminated against. I would never be okay with that.
Okay.
I mean, I have people that are, gay and lesbians in my life. I have cousins who are lesbians. So it's not, I don't have hatred
Do you have gay
in my
friends?
heart.
You have Jewish friends?
I
Do you have gay friends?
I'm trying to be funny.
Do you have gay friends? I want to know.
Yes, I actually don't have, like, I really kind of feel like I only hang out with my family right now. So I'm a little, I've got 3 kids under 3, so I don't really have friends right now, but yeah, sure.
No, seriously, you don't have gay friends?
Well, I have gay people in my family. So that's the extent of my friendships with gay people.
Are you homophobic? No, seriously, I want to know.
You're such an absurd
I thought you would
human
say,
being.
of course I have gay friends.
You're just
What
such
do you
an
think, bit my
absurd
hair
being.
in May? I don't know, I'm just
First
saying.
off, the person that you're just an absurd human being. Are you homophobic? Oh my God. I was just like, what does homophobia actually mean? Can you give me a definition of homophobia? If I was homophobic, would I be doing like this show? Do you think I'm like scared? Like I'm like, oh my God, look, there's a gay man. I'm so scared. It's
No,
Don Lemon.
not at
Like,
all.
to have
I
a
just
phobia
asked you a
is
very
like to
simple
have
question.
a phobia, a fear of, like, you think I fear like 2 gay men that are walking down the street holding hands, like, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't fear anything but God. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think God is to be feared, but anyways, I'm just surprised that you don't have any gay friends, because that, I just am. So listen, I actually enjoyed this conversation. I think people who disagree with each other should be able to talk and hash things out. So I hope
Did
that
you
will
enjoy it?
100% I enjoyed it. See, I think people think that conversations should be easy, that people should agree with everything. I have a different perspective on life. I have a different worldview than you. Many things you say I don't respect, but I respect you as a human being. And I think that the only way that we are going to make this grand experiment work is if at some point we try to at least have consensus on something. And sometimes the least of that consensus is being able to at least talk about it and go away saying, you know what, we agree to disagree.
I think that's fine. I believe in more speech, not less. So you will not make an enemy of me if you're talking about the right to conversation. I very much believe in it.
Candace Owens, thank you for appearing. I really appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It was great. Talk soon.
Bye. Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.